space is very challenging for the human body. Going out of gravity, it essentially causes this almost like rapid aging effect in a way. Your bones lose density and you start to lose muscle mass and you gain fat, and it's just really rough on the body. And what she found with the astronauts was that having small doses of movement or fitness or like resistance training, they have like stretchy bands and all the different things they do, was significantly more supportive for reducing the deleterious effects of zero gravity than doing one large bout of exercise each day. It's the same with the sun, it's the same with drinking water, it's the same with the way that you move. The body is this ongoing circulating system. One of the things that I think is very interesting, and there's a lot of debate around like what the perfect morning is, and then also the perfect evening. And it seems like there's the tossing around of like 90 minutes being quite valuable, particularly around like caffeine and things of the sort. And then at the end of the day, it's like blue light. And so I think it would be very interesting to start things off creating like the ideal 90-minute introductory container to the day, and then ideal 90-minute closing to the day.
Sure.
Would you be open to doing such like a structured question to begin with?
Yeah.
So starting the day, waking up, ideal 90 minutes.
So ideal 90 minutes. I mean, within the first 20 minutes, I think we should get sun in our eyes. And this sounds really basic, and sometimes you can't do it in the winter if you're in Minnesota or Washington State or something. But even just that intensity of the light when there's cloud cover, it's about 2,000 lux. And so we can quantify light. We're sitting in a room right now, it's probably 70, 80 lux, maybe 100, right? So it's fairly dark. Most buildings, commercial buildings you go into, it's about 200 lux. So that intensity is going to help kickstart this whole circadian rhythm from the cortisol awakening response. You know, cortisol gets a bad rap of causing belly fat, and it's associated with stress, but you want a diurnal rhythm of cortisol. You want it to be higher in the morning, soon after waking, and then you want it to be low before you go to bed. And that differential, the delta between the bedtime cortisol and awakening cortisol, the greater that delta is, the more healthy your circadian rhythm is. And so we'll get to nighttime later, but that I think is the most important thing, getting up. And I think, and you would appreciate this, movement in the morning in the first 90 minutes, you know, whether it's some sun salutations, a few downward dogs, taking the dogs for a walk. I do breath work, you know, sort of a hyperventilation retention sort of thing that I know you like to do. And we actually did a video on that a few years ago at your place in Venice or Santa Monica. So sunlight, some sort of breath work, grounding practice. For some people that can be grounding, for them is going for a run, you know, or whatever. For me, it's sitting, breathing, being aware of my thoughts.
Going for a run, I think it's interesting, the comparison of breath work to other practices like going for a run, which isn't really practice, you're going for a run, but going for a run literally is breath work.
Yeah. 100%.
And so that's something when you are engaging with breath work, like though in my book, I break down breathing. It's kind of like a gear system in a way, which I borrowed from a friend called Brian McKenzie. And throughout that, you know, when you're starting off in a lower gear, like say first gear, and you're just breathing through your nose, you can maybe even emphasize long exhalations, kind of put yourself in that more down regulatory state. It's an interesting thing to be able to kind of compartmentalize them as something that you can change your state just through the way that you breathe. You know, so you can start, and anytime you're ever feeling stressed, you're feeling anxious, you're about to go out on a date or a business meeting or something of the sort, and you might be noticing yourself, your heartbeat's starting to raise, you can actively downregulate yourself just by tapping into that breath and emphasizing a long exhalation, make sure that you're breathing through the nose. And then if you are in a place where you want to kind of hype yourself up, you might put yourself into that position. Like, how would you respond if you were maybe you're in some gladiatorial wrestling match, you know, or maybe you're up on the top of a mountain, you know, and you're it's high elevation and you're like barely going to be able to make it. Suddenly your body's going to go into this
upper chest. Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to be on top of a 20,000 foot mountain or wrestling a gladiator to be replicating that same respiratory pattern. And so you could be sitting down on the couch, kind of simulating all of those similar ways of being just from the comfort of your home by starting to augment the way that you breathe to mimic that same pattern that you would be doing like in the wild, which is very interesting. Just to be able to set or put the actual exercise and the way that you breathe and exercise, you can kind of achieve similar metabolic effects, whether you're moving your body or not, through the breathing pattern.
It's so key. I mean, this is something that I wish was taught in school. I mean, we learned so many different aspects of calculus and trigonometry in this, but it's like managing breath is so important in it. I used to have these like panic attacks, which I didn't know what they were when I was in sales, and I would get into it was usually a predictable situation where it was a meeting in a closed situation, high pressure with a woman for whatever reason, like in a tight, and I would just but I would get like I would feel this like impending doom, and I like learned how to breathe my way out of it, and it's never happened since. Sometimes before I get on stage, I'll have the sensation that that's coming on, that I'm just aware of my breath, and then it goes away.
Yeah.
If I'm giving a big presentation to like 500 or more people. But if we could teach that instead of medicating that with like, I could have easily went to the doctor and said, oh, I have this anxiety, give me an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety, or give me Xanax, but I wouldn't have learned that self-regulation. So yeah, breathing, it's key. It's key. So I work on it with my daughter all the time. She's 10, if she's frustrated or wants to hit something, or she's like irritated, we focus on, hey, slow down, 10, deep breath. We do it together, slow exhalation. So yeah, it's an amazing tool.
Today's show is brought to you by Myoscience Nutrition. As you can tell, we're talking a lot about exercise, being in nature, compressing your feeding window, and all the health benefits linked with those activities. One tool that can help you with your exercise session and recovery from sauna therapy is the Electrolyte 6 by Myoscience. This is a very unique formulation. You see many electrolytes out there, future USP sodium, who knows where it's imported from. What we do over at Myoscience is bring to you US-derived Redmond real salt. This is ancient sea salt paired with creatine and albion chelated minerals that are made right here in the United States of America. So this combination has actually never been done before. Again, featuring real salt, creatine, taurine, and a bunch of different electrolytes that are bound to amino acids like magnesium as well as potassium. So this unique combination can be used pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout, and post-sauna therapy. You can read some of the close to 300 different reviews over at myoscience.com. There is a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you don't like the taste of either the new lemon lime flavor or the orange flavor, send us an email. We'll send you a return ship label, and we'll take it back at no cost. So there's really no risk here, only upside. Again, it's really affordable and has not been done before. This combination has been studied by scientists, but not commercially available up to this point until now by Myoscience. So the URL to save is Myoscience. That's MYOXCIENCE.com. Myoscience with an X.com. Use the coupon code podcast to save at checkout, and I'll put links below. So let's get back to it with Aaron Alexander.
You can also augment your blood pressure. There was a study in Japan. It was just 6 deep breaths would actually significantly affect your blood pressure, at least like enough to report about, which is pretty fascinating.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
And I would like to talk about mouth taping and how you breathe when you sleep later, when we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, so getting back to the perfect day, right? First 90 minutes, we've gotten sun exposure, we've moved our body, we've done some sort of breath work, whether it's running, exercise, yogic breath, meditation.
Just something that makes you breathe.
Yeah, just checking in, really.
Like you don't need to be a spiritual person that sits in lotus position and does pranayama.
Right.
You literally could go for a run. That is breath work.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's just a fascinating, I don't think oftentimes in the breathing conversations, I don't think that bridge is made exactly, so it's like there's a lot of ways to peel an onion.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's just, you just need to get your lungs to expand and contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's key. And then moving for blood sugar health, for digestion, I think it's a lot of people don't take a crab. They don't go number 2. And that's a good way to, obviously get rid of, toxins that have been accumulated. Your liver, detoxes, a lot of things that it metabolizes throughout the day and things like that. There's this whole enterohepatic recirculation. So if you're constipated, you can recirculate some of those hormones that your liver helped break down. So it's really important to have a bowel movement. And that's a lot easier after you've done some sort of breath work, after you've done some sort of movement. And we've both shared this story about using clean nicotine products potentially to induce a bowel movement.
Yeah.
Before this podcast, we just tried the Knick-Knack product, which uses essential oils and stevia and a little bit of, it's 3 milligrams of nicotine, but that's something I recommend to clients too, to make sure, hey, in the morning you want to have a good bowel movement. You want your bowels to be, it's cyclical, like the rise in cortisol that we talked about in the morning. Your gastrointestinal tract has its own gut clock, circadian rhythm, just like your skeletal muscle, just like your brain, just like your pancreas. So we want to have these predictable bowel movements, and the morning time is a great time to do that.
Yeah.
There's controversies. I mean, I love coffee as well. I create this sort of situation where I reward myself a cup of coffee if I do a cold shower or a cold plunge. And I know there's questions about, well, should you wait 90 minutes? Should you wait 45 minutes? Some people just don't have the time, for the optimal morning to do that.
There's a thing with that. It's that the caffeine blocks the adenosine receptors. Is that correct? And so then you have a backup of adenosine that will potentially lead to like a crash afternoon crash.
Yeah, and that it could augment the circadian clock system or accelerate the circadian rhythm. So I think there's part of that as well. But I think we're splitting hairs, to be honest, on the clinical utility of telling people to delay coffee just because it theoretically might do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I think if you enjoy coffee and it's part of your structured routine, I don't have an issue with that. Now, people might disagree with me, but you want to have just a set of rituals that you do, again, to have a bowel movement, to start the day with a clean slate so that when you're with your kids or your customers or your employees, you present as a good person.
Yeah. I think sometimes it can be confusing when everything needs to be like science-based, evidence-based. If there's not some clinical trial, peer-reviewed research, then I won't, poop in this way or take this caffeine at this time or do like all of these different things. Like there's a lot to be said about just listening to what feels right for your individual self. And most of the research that we would be gathering or reading about or listening to podcasts about is coming from typically some like 18 to 22-year-old white guy at some college campus. And so a lot of what we're basing our experiences off of is some random young kid that wanted to earn $50 to be a part of some research study.
Yeah.
And most of the like bro science and things of the sort, like a lot of things, it's like science is tracing behind the pioneers in a sense, the people that are actually like out there doing stuff and they're experimenting and saying like, oh, I think there was something to that. Yeah. And then science is much slower moving. So I think that if you're always just waiting for some peer-reviewed scientific paper in order to, engage with your life in whatever fashion, like I think there's a lot to be said to kind of letting go of a lot of that, also holding a lot of it as well, kind of holding like two hands, but equal weight in your own felt sense of what feels good. And that's, I think, when we get too granular, I think like the joie de vivre aspect of life starts to dissipate a little bit. And most of the healthiest cultures on the planet don't know anything about any of these conversations.
Right.
Most of the centenarian folks, or like the Dan Buettner, the Blue Zones, they're just people drinking wine and having dinners together and working out in their garden and walking up and down hills with regularity, or they're a part of some religious thing, so they have closely knit community, and they're not they've never heard the term biohack before. So I think that's in conversations like this, that's like there's like always this ongoing message of like, there's also just something to just like, does it feel good? Like
it's so
there
true.
might be something to it if it feels good, and science might confirm that this feels good in like 2 years.
Right. Right.
You don't need to wait.
Yeah. No, this is such a good point, because a lot of people want to quantify, and then they want to ask the expert if this is okay, if what they're doing is working. Does that jive with the available peer-reviewed data? And so I think, we've lost track of checking into our intuition and trusting our body and realizing like, hey, this doesn't really make me feel good, you know? And so it's a great point. I like how you juggle, you know. For example, fasting is a good way to sort of look at that. You know, it feels good to sort of fast for most people till about 10 or 11. And that's when hunger generally starts to kick in, because the gastrointestinal tract, that whole gut clock, if you look at motility and the sort of neuronal intervention within the GI tract, like it's really active. Those enzymes, hydrochloric acid, pancreatic lipase, bile, all of this, it's really primed and most active at the middle part of the day. But we hear fasting is good for us. So what do? We fast till 8, 9, and 10 o'clock. Then we get jittery, we get a little hangry. And then we eat this big meal and our gut is not receptive towards that, because it's like, hey, we're about to go to bed here. Like, you know, it's thinking from a circadian rhythm standpoint that it's, you know, it's time to go to bed. And then so we wonder, well, gosh, I tried fasting, but maybe it didn't work for me. So when you start to feel those feelings of hunger, then yeah, it's probably a good time to start to eat, you know, maybe around 10, 11, then you could always stop eating earlier. And so that's when it comes to fasting. I know we're not there yet. That's what I encourage. But a lot of people inherently kind of know that, but they don't do that because they've heard, oh no, you have to intermittent fast all day, then you just eat this one big meal right before you go to bed.
Yeah. So with, let's say a person's planning on training in the morning, this is another contentious concept of, should a person eat before that? Should they eat maybe just protein, maybe some protein and some fat? Should they do a bunch of carbs? It really, I think it depends on like what decade it is and what year it is and what the recommendation is.
Yeah.
What like the science-backed recommendation. So what's the recommendation presently? Because it will probably shift in the next 2 to 3 years.
It probably will.
I presume.
Yeah, I mean, it's always changing. My recommendation personally, and this may not jive with the science, is do what helps you have the best workout. You know, so for some people, they're pretty fat, so-called fat adapted. They're okay in a low blood sugar state, and they can do a hard workout without having any exogenous forms of glucose, without having an apple or some oatmeal or rice. Other people are like, dude, I start to work out, I've depleted my liver glycogen, depleted my muscle glycogen, and my workouts suck. That's not a good state to be in, because the adaptations from the exercise and creating that oxygen debt through exercise, creating the hypertrophy, the stimulus to the muscle, to me overrides any sort of metabolic debt that you're going to create or metabolic stress by being in a low energy state. But that's just my perspective. Now, are you splitting hairs if you do just cardio on an empty stomach versus having it fed? Potentially you will burn more, you will oxidize more fat during that exercise session. The consequence of that is later in the day, you might crave more higher calorie foods because and women are actually more susceptible to this, what's known as like post-exercise food consumption.
Yeah.
So if you dig a big nutrient hole, let's say you do a CrossFit session or a SoulCycle class, right? And you burn 400 or 500 calories, right? Women are more susceptible to overindulging in the post-exercise window compared to men. So I think there's a lot of nuance, and this is where people need to sort of try it out and see what, like going back to what you said, balance it out. Like, okay, the research says I might oxidize a little more fat if I'm fasted, but then I'm like, go crush that muffin at Starbucks, which I know is terrible for me, but I'm like just craving it. Okay, then maybe have a little bit of food beforehand if you're crushing your workout. Now, if Sally Smith is 450 pounds, right, doesn't exercise much, it's okay if she does that fasted, right? But someone like you, someone like me, we're pretty lean. We've been exercising for a number of years. What I generally do is I'll bring some dried fruit with me to the gym or something, or I might have a protein shake with, you know, grass-fed whey protein or something to that effect if I'm doing a morning training session, just because I know I'm going to have a better workout halfway through if I have some fuel in the tank.
So another curiosity I have in relation to specifically burning fat, cardio compared to, say, like HIIT training. I know there's a lot of research around like that specifically. Do you have any opinions on if a person wants to specifically target burning fat? Do you have any opinions on how a person were to train? And we'll just say they were training in the morning. Yeah. So to stay on like the perfect morning routine. Yeah. So if you want to target fat specifically, would it be placing yourself into a, just going for a 45-minute run? or to be more intelligent to do something that's a bit more of like a high intensity interval training?
It's a wonderful question, Aaron. I think conventional wisdom would suggest that you need to burn a lot of calories by running. Practically speaking, the best way to go about it is some sort of resistance training. And then you could weave in intervals in that, or high intensity interval training, or some sprint type training to get you into that threshold of like, it's hard to have a conversation. Like, so that 7 to 8 out of 10 with relative perceived exertion scale, some sort of intervals baked into that is going to offer more long-term fat loss and then more sustainable fat loss, and then a better increase in your metabolic health as well. And even cardiovascular health. So this was actually recently studied in people who have had a heart attack. There was a recent study that just came out, I think in March, randomized people to just traditional aerobics, because again, you need to do cardio, right, for your heart, or resistance training. But in between sets of doing resistance training, they hopped on a sprint echo bike or did a concept 2 rower and did some explosive high intensity stuff, which most cardiologists wouldn't generally recommend to someone who just had a heart attack. But again, this was a randomized study. The people that did the resistance training and those intervals, again, in between sets, concurrently, they put on more muscle, burned more fat, and had better improvements in all the electrophysiology of the heart that is generally sort of imbalanced after someone has a heart attack. So since heart disease is the number 1 cause of mortality, at least in the countries where people consume this content, US, Canada, Australia, I would recommend, like what we were talking about, resistance training with some sort of interval built in.
Cool. So get up, get sunlight first thing. And what's the reasoning for getting sunlight first thing?
It's just entraining that circadian clock system. It's just, causing the cogs in the flywheel to move in a more predictable manner.
Does it matter directionality of your eyes? Looking up, looking horizontally, kind of scanning the horizon? Is there anything like that you're familiar with or have any opinions about?
I think just straight up look. I mean, it depends on the time of the day, but and season but I look straight into the sun. I'm not glaring
in
at it and burning.
In that first 30-minute window as the sun's starting to come up over the horizon. Yeah, and then so particularly looking up and scanning the horizon and such. That's like your eyes, your visual muscles. That's continuous with your central nervous system. It's neurological tissue, and so when you are looking down, you're kind of going into like your dozing off type scenario. That's going to actually suggest to your physiology, to your central nervous system, that's like, okay, it's time to rest. If you're looking up, raising your eyes up, looking up into the clouds, looking up into the trees, it literally starts to induce a sensation of feeling energy, feeling creativity. There's scanning the horizon as well. That's an interesting thing. That the suggestion is that when you're taking a walk and you're scanning the horizon, that can be supportive for like unwinding stress and things of the sort. And the suggestion with that is that it's sending an indication to your neurology or physiology that essentially like you're taking action, you're getting to safety. So if there was some type of stress that a person's having, from bills or some argument that you had or something of the sort, what that could have been X amount of 1,000 years ago, maybe you're like being attacked by a fill in the blank woolly mammoth, whatever the thing is. But you're stressed out. If you are just buckling down and kind of pinned down in place, that's not really, you're not moving yourself to a solution. And so the suggestion within that is that just literally just taking a walk and just kind of looking out and looking up, it can slowly start to unwind stress in the body, which is a really beautiful thing. And then another add-on with that as well is leveraging panoramic vision. So the same way with the breathing stuff, if you're hyperventilating yourself and you're doing like some Wim Hof type breathing style and huffing and puffing, that's going to start to upregulate you. It's going to say, okay, we are under attack. All systems go. The opposite of that would be, okay, just long exhalation, relax. At the same time, if you were under attack, you would myopically focus in on whatever the predator is in your environment. And so when you're focused in with your vision, That's going to, again, be a bit more of an upregulation of your nervous system. And so taking a walk, going out, and just taking it all in. And so have you ever noticed how you feel when you get to like, if you're in like a wealthy person's house, they might be up on a hill, might have big windows, you got on the deck and you're just looking out over the whole entire town. You're like, I don't know what it is, but I feel good.
Right.
You know, looking at that from an evolutionary perspective, that's like, you feel like you're in control.
Safe and
you're not kind of waiting for some predator to possibly come down and like pounce on you. Like, no, I'm looking out over everything. So a lot of the like scientific notions that we have, it's like it really all just ties back to, I think, like common sense. You know, if your physiology, if your visual muscles, if your respiratory muscles, if your postural muscles are in a place that most people in that place would match that state, it's probably going to have correlates, endocrine response, and neurochemical response. And so it's a lot of this stuff. It's like, yes, read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, but most of what they're suggesting, it typically would just make sense. And if it's too complex and too like, I'm not really able to wrap my mind around that, it doesn't really like match what just like intuitively I would know. You know, I would say a bit more, you might find out in 6 months or a couple years, like, oh, that wasn't quite accurate.
Right.
But the things that it's just like, oh yeah, like you're up on the top of the hill, you're taking it all in, you feel relaxed. It's like, oh yeah, that's all the neurological conversations with the visual muscles are happening there.
It's so true. And this is what animals do as well.
Yeah.
First thing in the morning, you know, you watch deer, you watch bear, I have backyard chickens. So I learned a lot by seeing what they do. And my dogs, like, you know, they do exactly what we're doing, but they don't have the conscious awareness to do it for their health. They're just living little animals, right? They're getting out in the sun. You know, in the wintertime, it's sort of a tangent, but it's related to this. In the wintertime, when there's a lot of shadows, you know, out, my dogs will go into this one little spot in the yard and just hang out in the sun. Then when the sun moves, they'll go into that spot. Now, are they seeking warmth, or are they just know that it's good. Chickens will do the same thing. And, you know, so to me, it's just like, it's part of nature. And if we were out hiking or hunting or just in nature, that's what we would do. That's why we would get up with the sun. We would look at the horizon, make sure there's no predator, like you just said. So,
but then you get too clever and you start reading all the research, you know, perhaps largely funded by folks who have bias towards maybe some type of big sunblock company or something of the sort. And suddenly you might start to have almost like this perverse fear of, you know, this thing that fuels every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Like,
I should wear sunglasses right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a really impressive. So it's like you get so in your mind that suddenly that sensation, that feeling of like, maybe the sun doesn't feel good for you anymore, because suddenly you have this nocebo effect of, when I'm on the sun, to me, that denotes like skin cancer and wrinkles. So that's where it starts to get kind of funny.
Yeah.
You know, we put so much of our awareness into like what we're told by who knows who's conducting the research or like who's backing it or any of that. And now there's kind of this competition in a sense. And so I think it's so interesting just to be like, yeah, like, what does your dog do? What does your kid do? You know, like, there's probably some deep wisdom to like, what is your kid's relationship to the sun?
Yeah.
Does your kid just want to stay out in the sun until they get sunburnt and like fried and like it hurts their skin? Or do they kind of go out in doses? You know, how much water does your kid like to drink?
Yeah.
How much water does your dog like to drink?
Right.
You know, do you need to have this perfect amount of water each day, or does it maybe fluctuate based off of elevation and temperature and maybe how much you're exercising or not exercising, or an air-conditioned room all day? Like, there's so many different variables within that. So tapping back into, again, just like, how does it feel? Does sun feel good on your skin? You know, and at some point there will come a time, you know, I relate being in the sun to like drinking water. You know, so one, you're not going to just drink all of your water at 8:30 a.m. Cool, I got all the water for the day. we're good until tomorrow at 8:30. You'd probably have a glass every now and again. You just kind of follow when you feel thirsty. And the sun, I think, is and I'd be curious your perspective on this, but I think it's a similar thing where it's like your body innately knows when it's had enough sun.
Yeah.
Like everybody has that instinct. You're like, oh, I think I got to get in. Or you'll start to feel depleted. You'll start to feel drained. So anyhow.
No, I mean, and then to continue on with that, animals do the same thing. When it's really hot, deer will find a rock that has a ledge, or they'll go into the woods. My dog on a hike, my dog doesn't know what shade is, but when my dogs are panting on a long hike, they find a tree and go under it and to cool down, right? So yeah, again, the theme here is that we need to trust that intuition and not always look for the guru to tell us, you need 17 minutes of morning sunlight and 27.3 minutes of, we need to trust that.
The same conversation is true with exercise in quotations or movement, also I think in quotations, because now there's all sorts of baggage around both of those terms. Are you familiar with a gal called Dr. Joan Vernikos? She worked with NASA for something like 35 years or so, and she was following astronauts, and she was like a health advisor for astronauts when they're going to space. And space is like very challenging for the human body. Going out of gravity is like ridiculously challenging, and essentially causes this like almost like rapid aging effect in a way. And your bones lose density, and you start to lose muscle mass, and you gain fat, and it's just really rough on the body. And what she found with the astronauts was that having small doses of movement or fitness or like resistance training, they have like stretchy bands and all the different things they do, was significantly more supportive for reducing the deleterious effects of zero gravity than doing one large bout of exercise each day. It's the same with the sun. It's the same with drinking water. It's the same with the way that you move. The body is this ongoing circulating system, and so it's just another kind of strange aberration, I think, of the way that modern folks engage with health and fitness, where it's like a pill thing. We're waiting to take the pill, as opposed to it being this thing that kind of regularly gets folded into the day, throughout the day. And so from a movement perspective, I think something that's, not that you're asking, but just piggybacking on the same conversation, integrating it into who you are is something I say a lot. So it's not exercise, fitness, movement, all that stuff. It's not a thing that we do. It's literally who we are. So as we're having a conversation, or we're doing a Zoom call, or we have a meeting, it's an amazing opportunity to go out and maybe do a walking meeting, or maybe if you're doing a Zoom call, you could place your computer someplace near a window. Maybe you could even open the window, get full spectrum sunlight coming in. You're also going to be getting all the different phytoncides and the chemicals and such that are coming off of the plants and the trees outside. You might be breathing in fresh air as opposed to this like deionized air conditioned air throughout the day. Yeah. You're just kind of allowing the nature to come in, and start implementing that into the way that, like the quality of your day throughout the entire day. I think that is, I think it's like the solution, but I think it's certainly a solution to a lot of the health crisis that we're having. We're compartmentalizing healthy practices as a thing that we'll do for 45 minutes as a solution to kind of buffer us from an entire day of being withdrawn from nature.
It's
and
key.
Our nature.
100%. And just doing something like that. I mean, if we think about a structured activity, like going to the gym like we did last night, which was great. We moved our bodies. We also got sun. We did all that. But doing the standing desk, moving around, taking the meeting on the road, like putting in your earplugs or whatever, headset, you're burning 30 calories here, 40 calories there, 70 here. And so that non-exercise associated thermogenesis, just telling the muscle, hey, we're active, that is going to help with blood sugar regulation. That's going to help with fat oxidation. That's going to help move the lymphatic system that gets stagnant. Stagnant lymph, I think, is an under-recognized and underappreciated aspect of the chronic inflammation that many of us have.
Yeah.
Our muscles, when they move, they're massaging that whole lymphatic tissue, as you very well know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's key. I think a lot of people, and studies that have actually shown this, marathon runners and people who are like really recreationally physically active, if they go and sit, that's just as problematic from a health perspective as to smoking. I can't remember one research study quantified like 2 or 3 cigarettes a day or something. Right?
Yeah.
So just because you did that hard workout in the morning, that doesn't give you the hall pass to just sit around.
It was James Levine, so he came up with this sitting is the new smoking thing.
Yeah.
I think it was significantly more. I think it was like 18 cigarettes or something ridiculous. I could be making it. Oh, no, it was loneliness.
Oh, yeah.
The suggestion is loneliness is like 18 cigarettes or some like insane, which that's most of the, I'm sure you're familiar with, or I imagine you're familiar with, it's like the longest longitudinal study in history. Is from Harvard. It was started, I think, like the late 30s.
Okay.
And they followed a group of individuals. I don't remember how many it was. It was something like 100 people or so, a part of it. And they followed them throughout their lives. And they had like regular checkups with them for the entire duration of their lives. Yeah. And then also with their offspring as well. Mm-hmm. And what they found in the study, you could just look this up to get all the specifics, but what they found with it was that the people that had the strongest relationships, that trumped all of the other factors. So a person that is, orthorexic and following all the rules and getting the perfect amount of sunlight each day, and getting the perfect amount of water and the perfect amount of ketones and
exercise. Yeah.
A lot of times I think the people that are in those scenarios, sometimes it can kind of fall into like a realm of obsessive compulsive disorder in a way. Mm-hmm. And with that, and I'm kind of just, I'm spitballing here right now. So this is not like, good. I'm saying this is the fact, or I'm trying to claim any expertise with this. But it seems like a person that is in that position of, I have a little bit of this, of being very meticulous with like organization, and I have to get everything lined up and everything has to be kind of, okay, I feel like I'm in control. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes that's coming as a product of feeling inherently out of control.
Right.
So that sensation to be able to just man, it's going to be all right. I don't have to have the perfect number of calories and get my macros and the micros and be completely aligned. A lot of times I think there's a lot of friction in that approach to living. It's like a linear approach for a circular experience. Like your biology goes in spirals and circles. It's not perfectly organized lines.
Right. It's so key. And related to that, it's a small tangent, but I want to get back to that social connection. What a lot of people have mental health issues now is as a result of being isolated from the people that they care about due to staying safe with COVID or flattening the curve and things. And there was one study that found that just the individuals who had suicidal ideation had an accelerated biologic age compared to individuals who had not. And this was a recently published study. It just came out in April. I'll link it in the show notes and get you the study. I thought that was quite interesting. So just the thoughts of, hey, I'm socially isolated, I'm distanced, I'm depressed, maybe suicide is an option. Just thinking that accelerates the aging of your biology. Or at least, we don't know what the chicken or the egg is, but there's a strong correlation. Looking at these whole epigenetic clocks, I don't know if you've talked about that on your podcast, but there's a way to look at the methylation signatures within our genes, that our epigenome, to see, because there's a predictable trajectory now. It's been quantified through artificial intelligence and computers and stuff. Like, hey, these methyl tags here might indicate that biologically, like you're 70 when you're really 60. Yeah. Things like that.
Yeah.
That to me was like, wow. So, I follow into this orthorexic type, like, I can like have it structure my workout. And if a friend invited me to like go play golf or go grab a glass of wine on Friday, I might be more inclined to like work out because I hadn't yet had my workout. But then I think in my head, like, no, I'm going to get much more value out of socializing with this person I hadn't seen in a long time. Yeah. Or driving you to the airport or something, just a conversation in 45 minutes than I will isolating myself to like get an arm pump. So I think it's just a good reminder that there is biology to these connections that we have with people. Yeah. Now that's not a hall pass to go party every night, but it's still, we need to remember, that there is biology there, and those meaningful connections really do matter.
There's another gal called Dr. Becca Levy that I just recently had her on my podcast a couple months ago or so, and she has a book. I think it's called Breaking the Aging Code, and in that I believe she's a professor at Stanford, and she's got her PhD at Harvard. She's got like all the accolades. It's one of the studies or the research that she had conducted was asking people around age like 30 in that time frame, their perspective on aging. And so like, what do you think like is aging? Is it like this really beautiful, glorious, experience where you get to learn more and you just keep on getting better, or is it something where you just kind of start to dilapidate and collapse and fall apart and get wrinkly and no one loves you anymore? Like what do you think?
Yeah.
And what they found with that research that was by age, I believe it was like 60 or 65, the people that had negative beliefs around aging, it was something like 2 times higher risk of cardiovascular disease, among other things.
Wow.
So the operating system that we're running, there's an opportunity to find some angle in life that life is a celebration. Life is a miracle. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what I'm doing, but let's party. Like let's like make art, let's make love, let's make connection. Like that's the number one, what do folks say is like the number one greatest regret from dying people on their deathbed?
Yeah, not connecting with friends or family, or
working too much.
Yeah.
Not telling people like really like opening up their heart to love, like
Right.
not really like really connecting with the people while they had them.
Yeah.
Like that is the shit that matters.
Right.
And we're so focused on, maybe not, I can't speak for everyone. I'm oftentimes am guilty of that. Just being focused on minutia, and notifications and boosting my profile and more money and more safety and, just run in the game, like on the wheel.
Right.
So to have that transition to start to navigate and come off of the wheel and actually like go outside, like I think there's a lot of health benefits packed into that, but it's much harder to contain conversations like that into like scientific research and studies and such, and it's like measurable. You can put it into a beaker. It's
Right.
like, okay, it's 2 liters of joie de vivre.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The mind is so powerful. I mean, I can't remember, I couldn't find the reference even if I tried, but I will try, with regards to food. So if people have this perception that this food is really healthy for me, let's just say blueberries or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
There is a greater like postprandial physiological, there's less of a glucose spike and things like that.
Yeah.
But if you have this
They did it with
perception.
milkshakes.
Was it milkshakes?
Yeah. They
Yeah.
said they gave you, I don't remember the specific details of it, but it was 2 different milkshakes. And the one milkshake was like filled with all of the stuff, and the other one was
But they were identical.
They were identical
Yeah,
thing.
just labeled differently.
Yeah, the way they suggested was it was filled with all the stuff.
Yeah.
And then, their response to it was completely different.
So, I mean, like you use the word no
crazy?
It's insane, man. So that's why like preparing food, I'm always thinking this is the healthiest for me.
Yeah.
This is, being grateful and having gratitude, because if you have this belief, you're like, oh my gosh, I have this one chip. Like you go to let's say, because we're on this path of social connection. Let's say you go to a party. They have Ruffles potato chips, right? And you're like, I'm going to have a few. And then you're thinking in my head, oh my gosh, this is going to kill me. My arteries are going to, I've been gluten-free and keto and I'm having this potato chip. I'm wrecked. That could literally, just having those thoughts could potentially cause more physiologic damage than just saying, you know what? I'm with my friends right now. That's the most important thing. If I have a little bit of this food, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to live,
Yeah.
Giving yourself a little grace.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the mind is it's just amazing.
Can we, all right, so that was the tangential version of the morning with a little like touch on some other randomness. Can we touch on before bed?
Let's do that. There's one more, what I think to be is an important aspect of the morning, and that is some sort of cold exposure, whether it's a cold shower, it could be the cold run outside, especially in the wintertime. But from a circadian rhythm perspective, and we always want to come back to this because as you age, the intensity and the rhythmicity and the amplitude of that rhythm gets muted. So as we age, it becomes even more important to get that morning sunlight and evening darkness. But because sleep is such a problem for so many people, I harp on this, and that is getting cold in the morning, not shivering, but it can be a cold shower. It can be that walk outside or an ice bath. You and I are big fans of deliberate cold exposure. because from a circadian rhythm standpoint, your body is accustomed to being coldest in the morning and your body heat gradually increases throughout the day.
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to be aligned from a health perspective in the 21st century, there's some added value there, especially if you have sleep issues, hormone issues, all of that. And so I do an ice bath in the morning. It's usually a shorter duration one, 15, 30 seconds. It's just that sort of thing, doing something challenging, stressing that, it's that hormetic stress,
Yeah.
but also because from a circadian rhythm perspective, temperature is an important external cue
Yeah.
that entrains the clock.
It's also causing you to release all of the like norepinephrine and cortisol and all the things that cause you to be alert and
Right.
and at the ready. So it's so funny how for me, I would rather drink a bunch of caffeine than get into a cold plunge.
Yeah.
But the quality of the way that you feel is always so much like clearer, cleaner, like upright
Yeah.
from doing the thing. It's just having the willpower to like to
Freaking do
quell
it.
your inner bitch,
Yeah.
you could say, and like do the hard thing
Yeah. It's such a good point.
if you're willing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe not everyone's ready for a cold bath, but it can just be a short cold shower,
Yeah.
10 seconds, 15 seconds. So I think we've gave people a lot of tips with regards to the morning. The evening time, I think a big aspect of having a good evening routine and inducing sleep is eating earlier and not eating within a 3-hour window before bed, which is easier said than done. I recognize people work nights, they work long days, they have kids, soccer practice, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you can cut off that feeding window within 3 hours before bed, there was randomized studies in women that had women eat isocaloric, foods throughout the day, but just had them kind of bookend their day with more snacks and food later, like within that 3-hour window before bed. And they looked at the fat oxidation and fat gain over the course of 8 weeks. And people, namely women who ate before bed, tend to put on more body fat compared to, again, energetically controlled scenarios when people just stopped eating within 3 hours.
That's what sumo wrestlers do.
Yeah.
It's a big part of sumo wrestlers to get fatter. They'll eat a buttload of food before going to bed.
Not good.
Well, unless you want to be fat.
Unless you want to be, if you're a lineman in the NFL or something, I can understand that.
Yeah.
So watching the sunset, as boring as it may sound for some people, but that is a great way. That low solar angle light, there's some people that speak a lot about this and quantify this scientifically. But again, we're talking about what would you naturally do if you're on vacation in Mexico or Hawaii with your partner? You're going to watch the sunset. A lot of us don't do that. We're in our car, we're watching TV. So many people are watching television to unwind. Taking a walk and watching that sunset and looking and watching that is good from a circadian rhythm perspective. And then after that sunset sets and within the 90 minutes before bed, really avoiding any light over 50 lux. And people are like, lux, why are you telling me this? Go on Amazon, it's a $29 investment, get a light meter.
You can just do it on your phone, right?
Or there's the apps.
An app for it.
You can do it on the phone. It's amazing how much reorganization in your house and just being more intentional about minimizing that light exposure. And again, the big sort of mechanistic reason as to why one would want to do this is because that light can suppress the amount of melatonin that you release in the brain.
Yeah.
And that is a key cog in the circadian clock system wheel from a neurochemical standpoint.
It's very quick as well.
Yeah.
Like you get a blast of light. I think it's like seconds that it augments your release of melatonin.
Right.
Like it's real time.
Yeah.
Eyes are sensitive.
They are. And actually the eyes, I know you have something to say.
No,
eyes of children are much more sensitive. I don't know the physiology, but due to the shape and structure,
Wow.
the same amount of light that you or I could tolerate would dramatically reduce melatonin release in children to a much greater degree. And this is important because a lot of parents, they've had a long day of work. They just want some quiet time. And it's easy to give a kid an iPad or a cell phone. Just be like, little Johnny, he's just doing his thing on the iPad.
Yeah.
But that is much more harmful for little Johnny than it is to the parents. And so this is a really important thing to underscore.
Sun also, the sun actually full spectrum rays of sun penetrating the eyes actually can change the shape and structure of the eye. This is I don't know the exact like biochemical reasoning for this, but this is suggested to be why I believe it's like over 90% of Chinese adolescents are becoming myopic.
Whoa.
And so it's the historically very like low percentage of populations have been myopic, and now it seems like every decade it's becoming more and more and more. And so one of the perspectives on that would be that we're just continually in this, nearsighted experience where our walls are, 10 feet away from us, and then we have our cell phone and our computer and screens and screens and screens. But then another parallel conversation that might even be a more potent conversation is actually literally that relationship of sun penetrating the eyes. Literally changes the constitutional structural makeup of the lens and the shape of your eyes, which is very fascinating.
That is so crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe it, because a lot of us, like you said, we use sunscreen because we're scared of the sun. And then we've heard that sun is damaging to the eyes. Yeah. I remember hearing that early on. And so I was very diligent about wearing sunglasses. Now I hardly wear them unless I'm on a beach, intentionally sunbathing and it's bothering me. Like you said, use your intuition. If the sun's bothering you, then it's time to put them on. But yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
And if you're going to use sunblock, then from my understanding, zinc oxide would be a good direction to go, or get a sun hat.
Yeah.
And get a long sleeve shirt.
Right.
There's a lot of ways to use sunblock that isn't like a
chemical.
A milieu of noxious chemicals that end up getting baked into your pores and into your bloodstream.
That have
crazy.
endocrine consequences, man. Good luck trying to find like a good sunscreen anywhere. It's like damn near impossible. They have parabens, they have all sorts of endocrine perturbing chemicals, and then you're giving that to a child whose hormonal system and future health is dependent upon a healthy hormonal system, and they're much more sensitive. It's freaky for sure.
What about, I know that we're on the evening container, but what about environmental? Would intoxicants be an appropriate term, like endocrine disrupting chemicals and things of the sort? And I say this in relation to kind of piggyback on the sunscreen conversation of like you're going to a Safeway or whatever, Walmart, and you're investing your time, energy, and money into this paste of chemicals that are toxic for your body to bake into your skin. And it's like, well, that just seems outlandish. And then, but it's also, maybe flame retardants in this couch, or electronic devices throughout your house. Or, we find out there was lead in the paint. And then we find out, X amount of decades or years later, it's like, oh, that was a bad idea. Like how many bad ideas are looming in the modern household? There's obviously, conversations about like dirty electricity and Wi-Fi and things of the sort. So that's another one. And then I'm also trying to be careful with not painting myself into my own nocebo experience, because I think there's a balance there of objective reality. And then also like our mind is powerful and our perspective is also meaningful.
Yeah.
But could we continue the sunscreen conversation and then kind of go into just general endocrine disrupting chemicals that are existing in our environment?
Yeah, I mean, they're pervasive. They're everywhere. Polar bears in Antarctica have, PCBs and phthalates in their blood and adipose tissue. So we definitely need to be very mindful about reducing exposure to these things. And so anything that has a fragrance is going to be problematic, because usually that is some sort of like paraben related compound. So filtering water is essential. Carbon charcoal filters, reverse osmosis, because a lot of the stuff does end up in the water supply. Particularly, I mean, this is well known in the state of Illinois. There's a lot of atrazine, a lot of pesticides and herbicides that are utilized in crops, in agriculture, end up in the water. And so a water filter is probably the best thing that you can do, because you're drinking like a lot of volume of water. And
there's a suggestion that atrazine particularly is associated with like gender dysphoria and turning, it essentially like transitions, feminizes frogs, I think was a big part of like the research that's been done with it. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, Anthony J. wrote a great book on that. I definitely refer folks to check that out. He's a friend of mine in Minnesota. But This is much more, I mean, it's important for everyone, but women who are breastfeeding, women who want to conceive, and new parents. And there used to be this notion that like, oh, it's all the woman's fault if a child has an issue. But us men, our diet, our smoking status, our endocrine disrupting chemical status really influences the health epigenetically and, the intrauterine environment to a big degree. So new parents, it's key. And so again, the sources here is going to be water, chemicals, skin products, household products. The flame retardants and the perfluoro compounds are pretty much everywhere. So they have been since outlawed in certain states.
You want to dust your house, keep your house clean.
Open the damn windows.
Open the windows. Get an air filter maybe.
Yeah.
But that's something that I learned recently. I was like, oh, that's good. But breathing in dust in your house, there's a good chance you're not just breathing in, whatever.
Dead skin cells.
Whatever. It's also you're breathing in some of the off-gassing of flame retardants and things of the sort that end up kind of just stewing and laying in your house and then eventually going into your lungs.
Yeah.
Keep things nice.
Yeah.
And open a window and go for a walk.
It's I mean, it seems basic. Right?
It is.
It's like, why are we even talking about this? But this is something a lot of people don't consciously think about. We spend so much money on organic food, and then we go and sit home and microwave it in plastic.
And so much money and just general investment, time, energy into complex solutions for simple problems.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that's really interesting. It's like if things are too complex, it might be kind of stupid.
Right.
It's like whatever, like the Paul Arden book, whatever you think the opposite.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the most, I was doing a podcast with, do you know Dr. Gabor Mate?
Yeah.
He's
in Vancouver.
He's lovely. And that was one of the things that we were talking about in the conversation. He's like, it's so wild that I get paid, whatever, a lot of money to show up at some conference and tell a bunch of people, really simple things that they already know.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's the trust and authority, and then it's funny, as Westerners, we need the peer-reviewed academic studies or the frog studies, the feminizing frog, to say, oh yeah, I should get a water filter, right? Mm-hmm. We need that sort of objective evidence, but that's just how it is.
So fragrances, what about what's a better or more health-inducing alternative to, say, like, is deodorants an issue, or maybe soaps an issue, or detergents an issue? And if they are an issue, what is a better path, or how do we ameliorate that?
Yeah, it's I don't have all the solutions, but I think shopping for those household cleaning products and deodorants at a more of a natural food store or Whole Foods, making sure that there's no fragrance, or if there is fragrance, it's from essential oils.
Yeah,
I think that's key. So going to the big box Targets and the Costco's and things like that for all of your household items, I think is going to be impeding your health, because
two companies I know of one is Branch Basics, replaces all of those things. Another one is from Katie Wells. Her company is called Wellness.
Okay,
they're both great solutions, and they're doing exactly that.
That's
so
awesome.
They're changing the toothpaste and the detergents and the soaps and all of that into things that don't contain any endocrine disrupting chemicals.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Which is cool.
I use like Dr. Bronner's
or that.
Yeah.
And a lot of those companies include what they do essentially is they give you a concentration. They give you one big bottle of a concentrate, and then from there they give you several other bottles. One's like Windex cleaner, one's like all-purpose cleaner, one's detergent for your dishes, one's for your clothes, and it's just different. They'll have a line where you put the concentrate up to that, and then a line where you put water. You could also just do that with like a Dr. Bronner's, or whatever your concentrate of choice is. There's a lot of. I think it's just. I was talking to someone recently, and they're suggesting that it was Daniel Vitalis. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
You have to be, right? He's like the rewilding guy. But one of the things that he mentioned that's not really in relation to this stuff, but is kind of sort of, is that he was saying to be like great at a thing, it's just you don't need to work that much harder. you just need to work like 5% harder. You know, this is what he said, whatever your percentage is, it's just as a general idea. But you just about 5%, just a little bit harder than everybody else. And suddenly, you know, you're like, you do that for 10 years and you become this great thing. And I think with a lot of these conversations of you know, the fire and brimstone kind of ideas of all of these terrible toxic chemicals that we're stewing in, it's not actually that hard to change. It's just you have to kind of make an initial investment of like 5% energy.
Yeah.
You know, just like 5 better products.
Right.
You know, like open the windows every now and again. You know, choose, instead of putting your cell phone up against your face and talking to somebody for 60 minutes, get some headphones, maybe get a little fanny pack or something like that so you can put your cell phone like a little bit away from your body, you know, and go for an amazing walk outside.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's so much low-hanging fruit, it's almost nauseating.
Right. No, it's true. But we just need to convince some people that having the cell phone close to your body is not healthy, right? Some people, you know, women put it in their bra, sports bra, when they go to the gym.
Yeah.
And that data has been out since 2013 that cell phones close to lymphatic tissue, drainage tissue here in the breast, is linked with increased prevalence of cancer. A lot of men, they put their computer or their cell phone right here on their gonads. And that, you know, I think a lot of us, again, we look for mechanism. Well, how could this phone mechanistically, you know, cause the gonads to produce less testosterone or whatever? But I think it's pretty clear that there is, you know, we are energetic beings, and these cell phones do emit.
Yeah, we're electricity, bioelectric beings. There's nothing frou-frou new age out there about that.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so continuing the ideal 90-minute container of the evening.
Yeah.
So we're paying attention to light.
Being very vigilant about that. And if you are going to be on your computer screen, obviously, then you can wear blue light filtering glasses. That's just going to help with some of that blue intensity light.
Yeah.
Eating within a 3-hour window, so cutting off your last meal, and then going for a walk after you eat that meal to sort of quell that rise in glucose, but it also stimulates digestion as well. And so that's important to understand. And, you know, we naturally would do this. If we were traveling in Italy or Greece or whatever, you'd probably be like, hey, let's go for a walk and check out the scenery. So very simple thing to do. And then ensuring that the bedroom is dark and cold. That's something that I think a lot of people, and I have healthy friends, some people still have a TV in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And they're watching television, it's bright, they don't have blackout curtains, or they have their electronics right on the nightstand. You know, because a lot of us will use our cell phone as our form of alarm clock. And so just being more mindful about, again, a cell phone is going to, an iPhone will emit, if you don't have any of the filters or light dim down, will emit about 40 lux. And as I mentioned, in the 3-hour window before bed, 90 minutes before bed, no more than ideally 50 lux. In the hour before bed and minutes before bed, you want to keep it under 5.
So 5, a lux essentially relates to the amount of light coming off of a single candle. Is that correct?
Yeah, something to that effect.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So yeah, your cell phone blaring like that, that's you know, north of 10. And so if that's in your face, you're watching the news or just mindlessly scrolling Instagram, that's enough to start to augment that melatonin release and sort of diminish or mute that. And again, if you're in your 20s, not a big deal. But as we talked about, the intensity of the amplitude of that whole circadian rhythm and that starts to get muted. And so you need to be more mindful about that so you're not waking up at 3 a.m. or having poor sleep or things like that. So
what about is there any kind of movement related conversations in the end of the night that you would like go for a walk outside or do any kind of something that I think is interesting, high beds. So in modern day world, our hips pretty much don't go below the height of a toilet, or a couch. So our hips don't bend beyond 90 degrees, or our knees beyond 90 degrees, our ankles, the whole thing. If you go to maybe like Japan or various different cultures around the world, it's very common. You maybe sleep on like a tatami mat or something down low on the ground. I don't personally do that, but it's important to add that healthy motion into the day. Help to circulate, all the fluids around the joints and just kind of like maintain general joint health. There's a book by a guy called Philip Beach called Muscles and Meridians. And he refers to spending time on the ground. He goes through a whole variety of different ground sitting positions and describes them as postures of repose. And so the way he describes that, there's a siren going by here. The way he describes that is it's like they're natural tuning mechanisms for the body. And so in relation to the sleeping time, something that might be really beautiful for the body would be to help you get yourself circulated. And something that might be nice to do that, maybe you do like a little journaling or a little meditation thing or something of the sort. If you're going to do that, maybe get down on the ground. You know, maybe something else a person might be interested in doing. Maybe if you could stretch out a little bit, you could put your legs up a wall, you know, kind of just get your body in like a homeostatic, balanced, circulated, clear state. You know, like kind of cancel out the day, you know, and then from there, it's like, okay, cool, we're going to bed.
Right.
But so within those movement patterns, something that also is interesting, tying that to like, how should the body move? You know, maybe it's totally okay to just sit in chairs all day long. Like maybe there's no real issue with that. If you were to compare the movement, like we do with like, say, the gut biome, things of the sort, to hunter-gatherer tribes, you know, the Hadza is a very common one in northern Tanzania. There were actually researchers that went out there from it was the University of Southern California. They went out there and studied the movement patterns of the Hadza tribes people for several weeks. And what they found is that they actually ended up spending about as much time in like resting positions as industrialized populations. So it was an average of about 9 hours each day. I think it was like 9.82 hours actually, like specifically, which is pretty much the same as the way that people in like United States or Canada or whatever, as far as like resting, you're sitting on the couch, you're sitting on the computer. The difference with those cultures is they are kneeling there, you know, they're essentially like just being a kid. So like if you hang out with a kid for any amount of time, they're going to get down on the ground, they're going to kneel, they're maybe sit back on their toes for a second, they'll be in like a seiza position, they may cross their legs, they might squat, malasana, like all these like we give these just natural human resting positions titles. It's just a human resting position. You know, so that would be something I think that would be of value, is to even still be attentive to the manner in which you're moving throughout that 90-minute window. You know, being aware that's like, man, like let's like finish strong. Let's tune the body before we go to bed. Let's tune the body when we wake up. Let's tune the body in the middle of the day. Let's just keep tuning the body.
It's so awesome. And, you know, it's funny. People will say like, hey, I feel so good when I'm camping. Like I fall right asleep but you're like, well, okay, it goes to what you were just saying. Well, you lay out your sleeping bag, you're on your knees, or you put up the tent and you're bending down. You're doing everything that you just talked about. And so it's no wonder that you might sleep a little bit better or feel like you crash right away. And so I never really put language to that, you know, moving, you know, your hips and knees in that way, but it makes...
Well, laying on the ground also acts as it's almost like a form of myofascial release or deep tissue or some form of tissue massage. So if you're in some like feather mattress bed thing where it's almost like you're not even in contact with it, it's like you're floating in space. It's cool, it's comfortable, you know, to be in like a sensory deprivation tank and just like there's just no contact. But from a musculoskeletal level and a tissue level, like your body thrives on contact. Like that's why you pay someone $100 to add pressure to your body. You know, and so by just literally laying down on the ground, like that is a full body massage. The ground acts as a myofascial release tool. You know, it's like we'll buy a foam roller, we'll buy a lacrosse ball. It's like the ground's sitting right there. We always have access to it.
Right.
It's just it's that 5%. You know, being willing to be like, okay, the typical modern household where, you know, folks that do spend regular amounts of time, they end up having significantly less to Northern Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, Southeast Asia. It was almost no incidence of osteoarthritis in the hips, very low in the knees, compared to the United States, where it's just like, of course.
Pervasive.
Yeah, you're 60 years old, it's time for a replacement. It's just normal.
Right.
And a big part of that is they're just continually bathing their joints in the various different fluids that denote health. And they're taking them through those full ranges of motion, getting into all the nooks and crannies of the joint, massaging it, keeping it healthy. When you just sit in place and go through these, 11 positions throughout the day, and that's it, we're missing out on getting into all the different angles to really like sculpt and cultivate the joints.
That's key. People need to hear it, right? And to have permission to sit on the floor or to move around or do yoga poses.
So one of the greatest gifts you could offer yourself as an elderly person, like right now, being a young person, get the hell down on the ground. It's the greatest gift you could provide to yourself as your elderly self.
Yeah.
Fall risk is the number one leading reason for needing assisted living for an elderly individual. Like I've fallen down, like 3 feet down, and I can't get up.
Right.
The only reason that happens is because we, or the individual, have divorced ourselves, or the individual has divorced themselves from just that motion of getting up and down. At some point, they did it all the time as a kid, and then maybe they wrestled at some point. That was a part of it. Maybe they did some kind of dance thing as a part of it, and then they got an office job. Then they were in the chair, then they're in the couch, and then the train, then they're in the plane, and then the toilet. Which even being on the toilet, that's disadvantageous towards being able to actually have a healthy bowel movement, because it puts a kink in your rectum. So literally, as you go into a deep squat, your rectum, it's called the anorectal angle, opens up so your poop chute can take a crap. And so by divorcing oneself from those natural tuning mechanisms of just getting up and down off of the ground, reaching your arms up over your head, with time, eventually the chasm becomes so large that we can't get it back. And then it's like, it would have just been way better if you went more of like a prophylactic approach and just kept doing it.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I think it's a great reminder for people, And at least, you get comfortable doing those poses in yoga. It's a good way to get started for, like a gentle type yoga pose, on the ground, doing downward dogs and child's pose, whatever, getting more comfortable.
Yeah. But it doesn't need to be like, that's something I think is interesting. We have, if you see somebody just taking care of themselves from a physical perspective in public, there'll be like a whispering of like, oh, like, do you do yoga?
Yeah.
Are you like a yogi? Like, no, I'm a fucking person.
Right.
Like, what do you mean? Yeah. So like, I think that, and being willing, I think, to be that person that maybe looks a little different. And if you're in a culture that, statistically speaking, is growing towards illness largely, there are a lot of beautiful things in culture as well. I think that's one of the issues as well in conversations like this. It can kind of like paint everything as being very just nihilistic,
right?
And like everything is bad, which then I think that we as communicators can end up actually being detractors from greater, health and well-being, because we're painting this picture of everything sucks.
Right.
So there's a lot of beautiful things as well.
Totally.
Going on in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you are in a culture where, statistically speaking, it seems like people are getting, larger, more obese. It seems like, all the things. I don't need to say diabetes, all the things. If you're willing to be different, you might be a part of a solution.
Totally. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And you don't need to be like like arrogant about it.
Right.
You just need to be like, have trust in yourself. And that if you're always waiting for someone else to tell you what to do, or to read some research paper, or have some peer-reviewed science to tell you to maybe pop a squat every now and again, you might be too late.
Right. Totally. Well, like you said, and I don't know if we were recording, but the practitioners always lead the science. And that's what these observations about, these people do this thing, and therefore the outcome is different compared to people who don't do the thing. That's what leads to the case study, that leads to the observational research, and then that leads to the randomized placebo-controlled study usually.
Yeah.
So when people say, "Oh, we got to wait for the research," you're like, "Well, people are doing this stuff, and they look better, they function better.
Yeah.
Why don't I just try that instead of waiting 30 years until we have it?"
Yeah, that's a big part of my most meaningful research in my own life is just finding people that it seems like it's working for them, and just sitting down with them and asking them questions. Mm-hmm. There's so much science there.
Right.
If you're willing to be a scientist, wow, there's something about this person. They're they have this effervescence to them, and it seems like it's almost like their bones and muscles, it's like they're floating in their body. There's just this levity to that person. They get up with the sun, and when it's nighttime, they get tired and they go to sleep, and they sleep throughout the night. It's can we just hang out? Mm. Just tell me what you do. I don't necessarily need to go into my cell phone and read a bunch of research about a thing per se. I love research, I love science, but I think there's a lot of research and science just in finding actual case studies where it seems like their biology is working, and just ask questions.
Right. We do that in other domains in life, but with health we kind of don't, right? If someone was operating a business and it was thriving, you'd want to have lunch with them and say, "Hey, what are you doing that..."
That's right.
But with health, we're like, "Oh no, I know it's working for you, but I'm different."
Yeah.
We put this label, I have Hashimoto's, or I have a low back issue, so that won't work for me.
Yeah.
And create these self-limiting expectations or things like that. So
I'm aware that we got to wrap this thing up because you have a dinner to go to. Are we? Can we kind of do the bullet points of the evening progression? 90 minutes. So light's a big thing.
Big one. Eating within 3 hours.
Cool. I just ranted about the general value of just having a general movement practice throughout the day, including the nighttime.
That's awesome. I mean, since our first conversation, I've been doing a lot more of that, sitting on the ground, doing computer work on the ground, reading. And then when I'm in the sauna, I'll switch back and forth on my legs and things. The other thing I would say is getting hot before bed. If people have an issue with sleep, going in the sauna, doing some sort of steam bath, or even a hot bath for that matter.
And that's because it causes your core body temperature to actually cool down in response to the heat on the sleeve on the outside.
Yeah.
Which is very paradoxical to what I would
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you do it and you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it.
And it's just calming. It just prepares the body to rest for 8 hours or whatever. So
cool.
Yeah, brother. That's you experienced the wood stove.
Oh yeah,
that was a nice heat, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, the other thing would be mouth taping.
Yes, we talked about breathing in the morning, but yeah, how you breathe when you sleep actually influences the quality of the sleep, whether or not you're going to have an adrenal or cortisol response, because there's this whole spectrum of sleep disorder breathing. People have heard of sleep apnea. That's on the extreme far end of the spectrum. Right in the middle, a lot of us have some sort of sleep disorder breathing, whether or not we were breastfed or had antibiotics as a child, or have a deviated septum. I mean, all these things influence how we breathe through our nose. And a lot of folks are unaware of the fact that they are waking up having mild apneas when they're sleeping, meaning that their tongue has collapsed their airway because they're breathing through their mouth, and that is disrupting all the deep stages of sleep within the brain, disrupting all the repair mechanisms within the brain. But it's also initiating a stressor, cortisol release, oxidative stress in the heart, and raising risk of all sorts of cardiovascular, cardiometabolic disease, and changing leptin levels. I mean, there's all these problems linked with it. So a simple solution, like someone's new to this, is actually mouth taping before bed. Yeah. So you walk around the house, you're gonna take out the trash, do whatever. Mouth tape, get used to breathing through the nose and preparing the nose for nasal breathing before bed. Because people have limitations, like, oh my gosh, if I put mouth tape on my mouth before bed, I'm gonna suffocate. What if I throw up? What if? So it's good to sort of get used to this, and then when you're sleeping, it's amazing. It's a wonderful way to deepen that sleep.
It can also help prevent or ameliorate the waking up in the middle of the night to take a piss.
Exactly.
Vasopressin. Does it increase? So vasopressin is that the diuretic hormone? Does it increase vasopressin, decrease vasopressin? Do you know how that works?
I can't remember. Yeah, I had James Nestor on the show. That was a really interesting aspect of it. And so many people, men and women, wake up to pee. You know? So yeah, that's another interesting attribute.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
All right. Good times.
Sweet, bud. So you have your book, The Align Method, and you
That's
came out with a
correct.
recent one in January.
So that was the revised version of the Align Method.
Okay.
Yeah, so that came out in, January.
Yeah.
And then, folks on your side are interested, something that we created recently that I'm really excited about it's called the Align Community. It's completely free.
Nice.
And on there, I'm on there, answering questions and such. We have exclusive content, various different hacks for sleeping and waking and self-care and mobility and exercise and strength training and things of the sort. Exclusive interviews, all that's at alignpodcast.com/community if people are interested in checking any of that stuff out. Cool. And where should people go to learn more about your stuff?
Yeah, High Intensity Health is the website, and then we're pretty active on YouTube. So
cool.
Same High Intensity Health on YouTube.
Cool.
So
sweet. Yeah, your YouTube channel is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I really appreciate the work that you do in it. It's very cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it. That's all then.
Right on. Appreciate you all tuning in all the way.
Cool. Thank you, Doug.
Brother. Have a good night.